Half a day and good morning. My name is Barbara Alberti, and I am the superintendent of War in the Pacific National Historical Park on Guam and American Memorial Park on Saipan.
Joining me today is Betsy Anderson, who is a landscape architect in the Park Service Regional Planning Program. Betsy is the project manager for the Rota Special Resource Study. When authorized by an act of Congress, the Park Service is responsible for conducting special resource studies to evaluate potential additions to the national park system. So we're pleased to be here today as part of this panel on conservation and restoration planning to share an overview of how these studies are conducted. We know that some members of the audience have assisted us in gathering information for this study, and we're very grateful for your assistance and look forward to continuing to engage with you and other subject matter experts as the study proceeds. We'll have more information about how to engage with the study team at the end of the presentation. Here you see an excerpt of the legislation that was passed in 2014, authorizing the special resource study. The legislation was introduced by Congressman Sablon, and it specifically directs the National Park Service to evaluate the prehistoric, historic, and limestone forest sites on the island of Rota for potential inclusion in the national park system. For example, the legislation does not direct us to study marine resources. Therefore, marine areas will not be included in the evaluation. The map depicts the natural and cultural resources on the island that the Park Service evaluated, such as conservation areas like the Itsansom Bird Sanctuary shown in blue hatching, and the historic sites representing ancient Chamorro, Spanish, German, Japanese, and World War II periods identified by the colored dots. Compared to the other islands in the Marianas, Rota's natural and cultural resources are largely intact and have been much less impacted by human actions and invasive species. So now I will hand it over to Betsy to describe how the Park Service conducts a special resource study process and how it has been applied to Rota.
Thank you, Barbara. Half a day, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to participate in this conference and on this panel. When the National Park Service is authorized to conduct a special resource study by Congress, the study process follows a clearly defined pathway. Study teams evaluate an area using 4 criteria, which I'll cover in the next couple of slides. It's important to stress here that these criteria are evaluated objectively by Park Service staff and subject matter experts. It's not the role of the study team to either advocate for or against inclusion of an area in the national park system. The criteria are analyzed sequentially, meaning that a negative finding for any criterion means that the study process is concluded at that point. The first criterion, as you see here, is national significance. To be considered for inclusion in the national park system, an area's resources must be determined to be nationally significant, meeting the criteria listed on the slide. The second factor that we evaluate is suitability. Under this criterion, the team must evaluate whether the area's resources are already represented in the park system or in an area comparably managed by another entity. The third criterion is feasibility, which addresses whether a study area is large enough and appropriately configured to allow for resource protection and visitor enjoyment, and also whether the Park Service could manage the area at a reasonable cost. Lastly, the study process then evaluates whether there is a need for National Park Service management. This factor recognizes that many other entities, both governmental and private, may be better suited to protect resources and allow for visitor enjoyment. This last step in the evaluation must determine that Park Service management would be clearly superior for the study area. So if the findings for all 4 of these criteria are positive, the study then proposes and evaluates possible Park Service management alternatives. Well, how have the criteria been applied to Rota? The slide that follows provides a very high-level overview of the national significance finding for the resources the MPS was directed to evaluate. In the case of Rota, the Chamorro archaeological sites, the World War II Japanese defensive complexes, and the limestone forests have been determined to be nationally significant, And you'll see additional detail related to all of these resource types on the slide, and I'll leave a bit of time for folks to take a look at those. Under the next factor, suitability, Rota's cultural resource sites and limestone forests have also been determined to be suitable resources for inclusion in the national park system. Using the limestone forest as an example for this audience, the limestone forests are not adequately represented elsewhere in the national park system or in comparable sites. For instance, War in the Pacific National Historical Park on Guam is the only Park Service unit with limestone forest. This forest is in small patches at War in the Pacific, is still recovering from the effects of World War II, and is severely impacted by the brown tree snake like other comparably managed sites on Guam. The CNMI has protected limestone forest sites as wildlife conservation areas, including some really outstanding examples within the study area. However, the CNMI government has primarily directed resources to forest protection and has not had the opportunity to focus on visitor enjoyment or education. Under the feasibility factor, number 3, the Park Service is still in the process of analyzing feasibility of a national park unit on Rota, evaluating several different factors that you see listed on the slide. However, preliminary findings have determined that a potential national park unit on Rota is conditionally feasible because it would require agreement and support from the CNMI government. Article 12 of the CNMI Constitution states that only people of Northern Mariana descent can own land in the CNMI. Therefore, any national park unit could only happen under an agreement between the Park Service and CNMI, and in partnership between the two. Under the last criterion, the need for Park Service management, it's really critical to recognize that the people of Rota have cared for these resources for centuries and centuries, and that CNMI and Rota agencies are actively protecting them. After analysis of a range of possible management options, including current management and Park Service program support, the study team has identified that National Park Service management in partnership with the CNMI could provide visitor services, education, and interpretation that do not currently exist on Rota, in addition to enhancing existing resource protection efforts that are already underway there. The preliminary finding under this criterion is therefore positive as well. So I will now return the floor to Barbara, who will describe the study process and next steps.
Thank you, Betsy. This slide illustrates the project schedule and key milestones for the Rota Special Resource Study. But with each study, the Park Service must balance the unique challenges and opportunities of the study area with our guidance and Congress's direction. For Rota, we're continuing to analyze the feasibility and potential management concepts based on the public input we received last fall. We look forward to answering any questions you may have, and we also invite you to reach out to us and share any recent research or data or other information that you might have about Rota's natural and cultural resources. In the chat box, we'll post the study website where you can find out more information about this study. And then our email address is on the slide, and we'll also share that in the chat box if you have any information that you want to share with us. We'll also post a link to our mailing list via constant contact in the chat so that you can sign up to be on our mailing list for future announcements.